Hallo? Doet het niet? Oké. Mag ik u...
Ladies and gentlemen, may I ask you to take your seats, please? I would like to open the meeting and welcome you all, the shareholders and all interested and guests, just like the last year. You will be able to follow this meeting live via webcasting. I'd like to welcome anyone who is following us on the internet. And a specific welcome to Mrs. Arnink and Kaier of Ernst & Young, our external auditor. Pursuant to the Corporate Governance Code, this external auditor is present to answer your possible questions with respect to Agenda Item 4 and the true and fairness of their view of our annual report. On the dais behind me, you will find the members of the Supervisory Board, Mrs. van der Meer-Moore, Mrs. Kennedy, and Mrs. Haynes, as well as Mr. Kist, Hochuli, and De Swaan. On the front row, you will see the members of the Management Board, Mrs. Matchett, Mr. Seibesma, Tanda, Dobotsky, and De Vries. Next to me, the Secretary of the company, Mrs. van den Broek. She is the successor of Mrs. Weitens and will make the record of this meeting. I would like to inform you that we are making audio and visual recordings of this meeting. You will be able to follow it via the website and the Twitter account of DSM. You will only be recorded visually from the back of the room and from the side. You will have received and seen the agenda with explanatory notes, which was published on 18 March 2015 on the website of DSM. Registration date was Thursday, 2 April 2015, pursuant to the legal stipulations of an exact 28 days prior to this meeting. I would like to state that the convening this meeting was done in accordance with the Articles of Association and all legal provisions. And I would also like to say that before this meeting you were able to give your proxy and voting instructions to an independent third person, that is our notary public, Mr. Visser, who is present. I'd like to make a couple of comments. The language in this meeting is the Netherlands. There is simultaneous interpretation into English and the other way around. If you wish, you can ask and address your questions in English to us, Mrs. Matchett, and Mr. Standan Dobrotsky will answer in English. I would like to suggest that during the question rounds, you will receive the opportunity to ask 3 separate questions in the first round, and in the second and third round, continue with another set of 3 questions. During this meeting, we will be using an electronic voting device. This is a new device, so we are going to do a trial. Last year we didn't have to, but this year we're going to have to go through that extra round. And before that, the secretary of the company will explain the procedure and will also lead the voting procedure afterwards. Now, if this electronic system leaves us in the lurch, we can fall back on the traditional way of voting, and then you will be able to use the voting ballots that you received when you registered. I just hope that that won't be necessary. I'd like to ask you all to turn your cell phones to silent. And please have a look around you. See where the emergency exits are. You will see green signs. And I would like to ask you to follow the instructions of our employees if we have to leave the building in an emergency situation. During the meeting, you will find coffee, tea, and soft drinks available in the foyer. You will also be able to follow the meeting via the screens set up there. I would like to ask you not to take drinks into this room. We will hear later from the notary public how many shares are represented here. I would like to now proceed to item 2 of the agenda, which is the report of the Managing Board. Mr. Siebesma, our CEO, will give an explanation of that annual report, and you will find his explanations on pages 18 to 61 of the Annual Report 2014. After his explanations, you will have the opportunity to ask questions or make remarks with respect to the report by the Managing Board and the report by the Supervisory Board, as well as the implementation of the Dutch Corporate Governance Code and the sustainability information, all integrated in the annual report. The execution of the remuneration policy of the Managing Board and the reserve and dividend policy will then be tackled under agenda item 3 and 5. Mr. Siebesma, please. Well, thank you very much, and welcome to this general shareholders meeting. It's great to see you all again. The slides I'm presenting to you today will be in Dutch and in English. You will find the Dutch slide on your left-hand side and the English version behind me. The English version, though, is the guiding version for the company. They're practically identical, I have to say. But before I start my presentation, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to stand still with respect to the situation in Nepal. And I would like to explain to you what DSM is doing there. I would like to invite you to make a contribution as well if you haven't already done it. At DSM, we've decided to help the situation there. There are estimates that say that thousands of people have died, that 8 million are in distress, and 1.5 million in need of food aid. You know that DSM produces a number of vitamins and supplements and nutritional ingredients. We've decided to take action quickly and to match what our employees are donating with a cap. We would like to invite you to make a contribution via our website of WFP with the indication of DSM, not because you're so proud of doing this also on behalf of DSM, which I understand you are, but also because we are going to match the contribution you are making. We're going to calculated into the contribution of our employees. We've also laid out flyers in the hall so you will be able to read up on it and to look it up on the website. I'm very proud that the employees of DSM take this responsibility and do not turn their backs to these people in dire need. Let me start with a brief video introduction and an overview now of 2014. The video is in English, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you can follow it, and I'll be explaining everything else in Dutch in a minute.
In 2014, all of us at DSM strive to make the world a better place for people today and generations to come. Let's take a look back at some of the highlights from this year. In 2014, we touched the lives of many. We recognized our people for best practices in safety, using the life-saving rules to stay incident and injury-free, looking out for your colleagues and for yourself. We engaged with governments, business, academia, and NGOs about doing business a better way, to make the world a better place for all of us. And we continued our fight to end hunger and malnutrition, helping those who were struck by disaster or in need. Some of us were even running to fight hunger. In 2014, we took action to preserve the planet. We celebrated Earth Day, making 5,000 personal commitments to a sustainable action, and we worked hard to realize them. We opened a solar technologies demonstration center in India, showcasing the performance of our innovations in solar technology to secure energy for the future. And we're awarded in Singapore for our efforts and best practices in sustainability. We entered into innovative partnerships using our high-performance materials to be the fastest by bike on the planet, prevent food waste with our smart packaging, and to reduce energy consumption of cars. And we entered a new era, opening one of the first advanced biofuels facilities in the world, leading the way towards a future free from fossil fuels. In 2014, we grew our business sustainably. We made important strategic steps, strengthening the DSM business portfolio by creating joint ventures, making acquisitions, and investing in new facilities. We sounded the gong at the Amsterdam Stock Exchange to celebrate 25 years as a listed company. We appointed a new Chief Financial Officer to the Managing Board. And all of us embraced the One DSM culture agenda, delivering speed, being accountable, having an outside-in mindset, and becoming more inclusive, contributing to the performance of our teams and our company. Let's be proud of what we did in 2014.
Let's not forget all of our employees worldwide, what kind of great company that you contribute to, that we have built over the years together. A company which is touching the lives of many to make it brighter. And we can be proud of that.
Goed, de hoogtepunten.
Those were the highlights of 2014. And let me give you the numbers that go along with that. We had a turnover sales of 9.2 billion with 3% organic growth. And that is our not restated sales figure for the last year, because in 2015 we'll have to restate because of the partial sale of our polymer intermediates business. And also, not included is the sale figures of our two pharma joint ventures which are practically deconsolidated, but we still have a share of about 49%. EBITDA, quite solid if you look at it in the context of the circumstances of 2014 at 1.17 million euro. A number of factors have actually pressurized our profits. One, currencies, there's a plus there. Sometimes it works the other way around, a relative plus. Compared to 2013, we had a minus with a relatively strong euro in 2013 still. Nutrition, some headwind, and caprolactam, the business that we've now separated off, had a difficult time last year because of the strong competition from China. Other highlights I'd like to mention are with respect to the high-growth economies, India, China, innovation and sustainability. I've already mentioned the partnerships we've entered into. Let's get back to the numbers. 4% sales growth compared to 2013. Profit decrease because of caprolactam, headwind, nutrition, and the currency fluctuation. Looking at EBITDA and subdividing it into the various business sectors, we see that disappointments came from nutrition specifically. They have huge difficulties with respect to the currency headwind and the polymer intermediates, specifically caprolactam. Why nutrition? Why such pressure there? Start of the decline of the vitamin A prices. Vitamin A is important for DSM, specifically for animal feed. Second half year decrease, been under pressure the whole year. Fourth quarter was specifically difficult, still continuing to be pressurized. Those who have looked at our quarter one figures will have seen that 2015 shows 80 million, 20 million per quarter of decrease there with respect to vitamin A and the lower vitamin E and the lower pricing. But we're trying to get a higher profit in 2015, even though we still have strong headwinds to deal with in vitamin E. Then the worldwide food and beverages market, a bit reluctant, and now recovering with the huge pressure on prices in the food and beverage markets. The retailers, the private labels are winning in market share. The other part, dietary supplements, nutritional supplements. I'm not sure whether you take them every day. It's very smart to do that because most people have a deficiency. In the U.S., actually 85% of all American citizens. Still, there are TV programs that maintain that this is not true, and that has pressurized the market, specifically in the omega-3 segment. Last year, we suffered a bit. This year, a bit normalized again. In 2013, we sold a lot to the infant formula market. Our customers expected that the one-child policy in China would be left behind and population increase would come very soon, but the average behavior of Chinese fathers and mothers hasn't changed. So the exchange rate makes more of a mark. Last year we had a dividend of 1.65. It is the suggestion for this year as well. You are going to have to vote on that proposal in a minute. And if you accept that, then the final dividend is going to be 1.10, which makes the full dividend €1.65 for 2014. And as usual, you can be paid out in cash or in shares. The strategy. You will recognize this slide and the following one because I've been showing it to you for a couple of years in a row now. These are the trends, these are the drivers of our strategy. Everything points toward healthier lives, healthier nutrition. A large part of the illnesses come from our lifestyle and our nutrition. More than 50% of those illnesses are created by our own behavior. We can do something about that. And nutrition plays a major role there. There's a whole shift in economies. There's a whole area of issues ahead with respect to climate change and resources constraints. And that has led to the strategy that we've been following since 2010. End of this year, we're going to do an update exercise. In 2016, we don't want Vision 2015 to hang around anymore. We're going to establish a new strategy for the coming years. We're working on it, and we'll present it to you with more info in November, I expect. You see our most important core businesses, life and materials sciences. Life includes nutrition, materials, performance materials. We've made a major step to indeed separate the bulk chemicals business in caprolactam and polymer intermediates. We're still 35% owners, but that in the course of our expectations, also following the partners we have there, we expect that that will follow its own route. With respect to three developments, we have important drivers here: the emerging economies, the high growth ones, innovation, sustainability, and acquisitions and partnerships. Now, let me tackle the high growth economies first. Unfortunately, the world does not follow what we expected of it in 2011, 12, and 13. In those days, we said the emerging economies in China, Russia, India will grow quicker than the more stable ones in Europe and the US. More people live there, more people will start belonging to the middle class, they'll spend more, and the birth rate will be much higher. The 2 billion people that this world population will increase by in the coming decades will be living in those areas. Our logic told us we have to be present there, and that is what DSM did. We took a strong position there. We've actually sent part of our top management there, and we reap more than 40% of our sales from those high growth economies. In the meantime, we've learned, though, that not all of them do as expected. Brazil, not 5%, but less than 1% growth. Russia, not 5%, but less than 0% in the past year. China is flattening off, and the U.S., in the past year, has acted as if it belonged to a high-growth economy. The most recent figures, though, show a more normal picture. Still, DSM wants to continue investing into those high-growth economies, and we expect more growth also for our company there. A second innovation, 20% of our sales will have to come from new innovative products in the pipeline or introduced in the past 5 years. Now, you will have to indeed try to achieve that by running really fast. We're close to it in nutrition, in performance materials, even a bit higher, and we're going to develop 3 emerging business platforms at DSM. Innovations working very well. We're developing new products to indeed ensure our turnover and sales. Sustainability remains a strong business driver, a value that we fully support, the way actually in which we make our money. Sustainability is what we deliver and supply our customers with. We make cars greener and iPads and electronics, and we make nutrition better and greener. Those products that carry our Eco Plus label have less large environmental footprint than those of our competitors. And they have a higher margin. We're talking about 40% of such eco products in the meantime. Acquisitions have played an enormous role in the growth of DSM. Most of the acquisitions in the area of nutrition. We're working on integrating them fully, looking at management, organization, concepts, etc. The only one that is just a bit reluctant, even though the value of the company is above what we paid for it, that is Ocean Nutrition Canada and the omega-3 segment, and that's a growth segment as we expected, but unfortunately the growth is subpar. Then, looking at acquisitions and also looking at the most recent move with respect to polymer intermediates, you will find that our portfolio in the past 10 to 20 years has changed substantially. We are a different company. We've moved away from bulk chemicals. We've disposed of them and moved towards innovative, high-value products. I believe that we've been quite successful in the past years. But there's no presentation of the enterprise value or the share price, and I believe that the shareholders' presentation for the fourth quarter will show you those numbers, and we see that they are increasing step by step, just as our portfolio change has taken shape. Nutrition, a very broad, strong business. We're the largest and the strongest company in this area worldwide. We're backwards integrated because all the components are mixed and blended and tailor-made by us as the customer desires them. So we have the production and that tailor-made phase as well. We're looking at a whole plethora of nutritional ingredients. You see on the left-hand side what our broad portfolio includes. We see these products in various markets, in nutrition for humans, but also for animals. In both areas, you will find our activities and products. And this pie chart illustrates the segments and the distribution. It's quite logical that you indeed serve and supply so many segments if you're the largest in the world. Sometimes this makes our communication with shareholders a bit difficult. There's always news to communicate. That's the way the world works. There's a bird flu here, and there's another difficulty draft there, or something going on with infant nutrition, etc. We try to keep the market informed. DSM's position is very strong and sound in all these areas, also our market share. Another area of activities in materials. We're continuously updating our portfolio. That is the green part right at the right-hand top. You see new high-performance materials, new for new energy sources, and to the left-hand side, more commoditized products that we now dispose of as caprolactam and composite resins, which you find in this graph. The three new emerging business activities and platforms refer to biomedical products, innovative materials, ingredients, and materials specifically for the human body, new hips, new knees, all sorts of bits and pieces that have to be replaced with an increasingly aging population. I've said that repeatedly in this meeting. The human being wasn't really designed to keep its body active for 80 years and more, and sometimes body parts will have to be replaced, and that is what DSM is working on. The two other segments relate to renewable energy, all sorts of products for the solar panel industry, which is growing. The sun delivers per day more energy to the world, and even to that small part that the sun is shining on. It's incredible. That small part that the sun shines on offers more energy than what the whole Earth and the whole population needs in 1 year. Now, if we can increase the yield of solar panels, we're going to be very sustainable. DSM is working on it with coatings, with materials in the solar panels, where we have an even stronger position in the meantime. The other area is our business with respect to bioenergy. Second generation of biofuels, you may know something about it, where plants are used and then transformed into ethanol, and that then is used as fuel for cars in Brazil, in America, etc. Those are materials that you can use in nutrition as well. We're not active in that area. We use only the waste that normally is thrown onto a landfill or burned. Now that is waste that we can use, transform into ethanol, etc., and use as energy. This is a technology we developed a couple of years ago. In the beginning, it seemed impossible, but in the end, it did prove to be possible, and we built a factory in the city or village of Emmersburg. Please don't worry if you've never heard of it, because it's in the middle of, well, the Corn Belt, not in the middle of nowhere, I was about to say, but in the Corn Belt in Iowa, in the USA. All the raw material, all the waste products we need there can be transformed into renewable energy. There were all employees present and 2 ministers and American representation and our king. We have a short video film to show you.
Steps were taken on the actual soil that is about to change the energy landscape for our entire world.
Now I know that there are some skeptics out there who may be asking the question, is cellulosic ethanol for real? Can it be commercially produced? Well, I say come to Emmetsburg and see this extraordinary facility that's going to produce 25 million gallons.
We need 1,000 of these. 1,000 by 2040 or so. 1,000 of them. So there's an enormous market.
This is not the time to backtrack. This is the time to continue to move forward with exciting new technology.
this is just the very tip of the iceberg. This is only the start. Ladies and gentlemen, we are witnessing what I believe is the foundation of what will be a complete transformation of our energy supply and our economy.
Through producing 100% renewable bioethanol from agricultural residues to replace gasoline, we can transition from a linear economy where we take, make, consume, and dispose to a circular economy where waste does not exist, but it is input for new cycles.
Thank you very much, Poets and Royal DSM, for inviting me to be part of this grand opening of the Liberty Project, a new beginning in the way we appreciate energy. Royal DSM, which is joined with the great company Poets, is bringing that innovation here to Iowa, to Emmetsburg. And I'd like to congratulate Emmetsburg, Iowa, and the United States to have this premiere on their soil.
Altijd wat
There's always some difficulty in the startup of such a factory, and everyone worked on it, and as our king and the minister said, it is a revolutionary technology. You heard the Undersecretary of Energy in the US saying that he is expecting thousands of such factories in the US. We're not going to build them, we're going to supply the licenses and all of that for the US and the rest of the world. And we'll be happy if we get 10 or 20 out of them. It doesn't have to go to the thousands. Now, the partnership with CVC. We've been announcing for years that we want to divest bulk chemicals, caprolactam with its huge influence from China and Asia, the composite resins. Those are the last bits and pieces in DSM. What is extremely important is that we have the supply, and we therefore brought all of this together in a partnership with CVC. We retain 35% of the shares and CVC 65%. Yesterday, we've presented our Q1 figures for 2015. And in the end, we conclude that the result is satisfactory. The results are fine. Geraldine and myself said, fine, well, that's a Dutch or English understatement. In the end, good. Profits up. Nutrition, good organic growth, plus 4%, driven specifically by animal nutrition, whereas human nutrition stayed behind due to the same factors we mentioned for 2014. Performance materials, good results in the first quarter, higher volumes and margins as well. Cash generation, very important. What remains in hand is important. First half of 2014 was negative, then it depends on the stock movements down to the fourth quarter, but positive developments now. We're working on a couple of programs to increase profitability in nutrition and also in the various support and service functions at DSM. We'll talk to you more about this later in the year. The outlook we'd given in February 2015 for the whole year was upgraded after the first quarter with the provision, if the currency values remain as they were yesterday, you have to be very, very careful with what you announce here, then we could have an increase of 45 million. But that is what we said about the currency values yesterday, about the currency rates a couple of days ago. And the dollar, in the meantime, has changed a couple of cents, so we have to take into account what the foreign exchange effects are. And that concludes my presentation on 2014.
Thank you, Feike, for this excellent presentation. Insofar as they're still present here, I would like to request all the photographers, all the camera operators to leave the room. So now I'd like to give you the opportunity to raise questions on item 2. You can use one of the microphones in the room, and I would request you first and foremost to be very clear in stating your name and, insofar as relevant, the organization that you're representing. Microphone B. Thank you. My name is Michiel van Es. I work for Rebecca, and I'm speaking on behalf of Go Investment Partners, Goudse, Mensis, Sintrus Achmea Fund Management, and Triodos Investment Management. DSM has gone through a tough year. Exchange rate effects and difficult market conditions for nutrition have put pressure on the results. Nonetheless, a number of important strategic steps have been taken. We appreciate the joint venture with CVC in terms of DSM's caprolactam activities, which are quite cyclical. There are a number of elements in the portfolio that are showing disappointing performance. Vitamins and nutrition, by way of example, the value of DPX is not being reflected in the valuation of DSM, and we would call on you to take a critical look at the composition of the portfolio. DSM is a company with a dynamic portfolio. We consider it important that DSM make sure that the synergies in its portfolio are well reflected, and that'll be good for the cash flow. The cost program that DSM has drafted in order to achieve all this has a high priority in our mind. My first question is, can you tell us whether you're on track with this program? Sustainability performance of DSM merit compliments. The annual report highlights sustainability as a value driver. The annual report, in our view, would be even more interesting if you would address the following matters: a description of the value creation process per segment. Second, a true value, true price description with the financial statements. And third, a breakdown within your report on nutrition, which accounts for 2/3 of EBITDA. So that would be an adjustment that we would like to see in next year's report. A question on sustainable use of sustainable energy. You don't have any targets as DSM. A number of your peers do have these goals. In view of the high energy consumption in the sector, it is very important to do so. Last year you said that in the following strategic update you would address the matter. My second question is whether you can tell us whether there are any specific plans for such a target. Third question now. Last AGM of DSM changed its auditor. And because of this change, audit and non-audit related work is no longer dealt with by one firm, which is positive. We've been calling on DSM to appoint the external auditor annually, and we would like to insist on that again. I'd like to hear from you on this note. Thank you very much for your questions. I counted 6 questions, but I'm not very good in math, I don't think. Anyway, 3 suggestions and 3 questions. Ah, yes. Well, it may or may not be tempting to respond to these suggestions. Mr. Sieversma, I'll answer your questions. Thank you for compliments on CVC. We think it's a good step. You say there are a number of elements in the portfolio, which in the restyled portfolio, that are not showing good performance. Quite correct. In a portfolio, there are always things that could be improved, things that do better and less well. We think that this is a sound portfolio that can perform well. And human nutrition, we see that there's room for improvement. I just said that. It's not true that vitamins are not performing well. It is true that the enormous margin that we used to have on vitamin E is now just a normal margin, whatever normal is then. DPX, the value of DPX, is not fully reflected in DSM. I don't know about that. We're very transparent as to the performance of DPX. I think that we have an excellent deal, an excellent partnership in the US, and it's up to the shareholders to decide how they appreciate this in terms of the share price of DSM, and we are offering full transparency. I have helped the shareholders on a couple of occasions. I have said if you look very carefully, you may be able to calculate that there may be a bit more than $1 billion value in that. And one of the shareholders responded, well, you don't have to do the work for us. We can do that ourselves. So that's it. cost programs are on track, but you can't know about that because we haven't published our targets. We have said in the course of the year we will be disclosing more information as to how we're going to improve efficiency of nutrition and the rollout of the program. The annual report. A better value creation in the annual report is what you want, also regarding the real and actual prices. You referred to the true price concept. You're probably referring to the in-pricing of externalities, use of water, consumption of water, and other products. And we're not doing this on our own. We're working with other parties, inter alia, in the context of the World Business Council Sustainable Development. Now, it's quite useless for each and every company to have separate definitions and publishing all sorts of figures that can no longer be compared. And undoubtedly, you would ask us, well, how come you have this figure and the other company has that figure? So we're going to try to offer more transparency step by step and a better breakdown in nutrition. We're already doing this. We offer a breakdown between the different activities and operations in nutrition, organic growth, price fluctuations, volume in animal health, human health, specialties, and how the margins are developing. So I think we are providing that information. Sustainable energy. Yes, we said this last year, that in the course of the year, towards the strategy update, we will providing more disclosure. And yes, we will be providing new targets. Indeed, we have a new auditor, and the name of the auditor is KPMG. And how about appointing him annually? Answer from the chairman, no. Next question. Mr. Stevens. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Stevens. I'm at the Foundation of Legal Protection of Investors. Yes, well, it has been said before today. The mix is weaker than expected. EBITDA decline 18% in nutrition. Net loss in Q4, 107 million, because of a write-off 186 on caprolactam. That was lower than expected. Well, you are selling this business, and we are wondering whether you're not selling it at an all-time low. Isn't there pressure here? We're getting the impression that, well, we've once seen this with ABN AMRO Bank, and we really hope that you're not going to fall for the same trick. Let me see, because a number of things have already been addressed. Oh, yes. People sometimes speak about splitting the company or separating the company. Well, we're not convinced, but perhaps it would be a possibility to do an IPO for Performance Materials. Or in part, you may have given it some thought. And then omega-3, poor performance, lagging behind. It's not entirely clear to us what it is that you intend to do with omega-3. You may be riding the wave, but... And then an additional question. You're talking about new strategy. Would that be for 2020? Or do you have a shorter horizon? Those are my questions, Mr. Chairman. Caprolactam. Yes. Well, we didn't sell it. We just divested part of it. I understand your question nonetheless. Did we do this under pressure of third parties? Well, if you read our press releases, and I'm sure you have over the last few years, the first time we commented on caprolactam was in the summer of 2012. We issued a statement, and we did this, and we repeated this on many occasions, saying that we would be looking for a reduction of the free market, the emerging market of caprolactam, and that we really wanted to get rid of that. That is what we said halfway mid-2012. Third point, a statement was made, and we said that far before that. So these things are not linked to any suggestion of any shareholder whatsoever. And why? Because caprolactam is an incredibly volatile product and business. Sometimes it generates enormous profits and sometimes no profits at all. And right now it has the structural development that is very, very tough because of enormous competition from China. And we said that we've got to change the positioning. But we wanted to secure captive, so that is what we did with this deal, because that's what we use in-house. For 10 years, we've secured that. And separating or splitting the company, you say that there's discussions about that. I don't know. I myself don't talk about it. But what we are doing, what we're working on, is constantly upgrading our portfolio at DSM. Actually, this is something we've been doing forever. If you look at the past 20 years, you see a continuous improvement of the portfolio. We've said this before. There are no elements of our portfolio that are sacrosanct, that cannot be touched. And at this point in time, now that we've reviewed the portfolio, we are working on a further improvement of the performance of our materials and nutrition business. And as you said, this is needed, and Mr. Tander can explain what's going on with omega-3. And indeed, at the end of the year, we will be updating our strategy. And ordinarily, we have a horizon of about 5 years, so it can be expected to be 2020. However, usually we also have targets for the next 3 years, and after 3 years we will then evaluate and review the targets. Now, we've done this for about 15 years, that we look ahead for about 5 years, and then after 3 years we just stop to look back and to evaluate. And I can't rule out that we will be doing that this year. Stephen, omega-3.
Thank you, Franke. Omega-3 is one of the best researched ingredients in terms of health benefits. So whether it is heart health, brain health, reduction in inflammation. So we don't think we are riding a wave or a fad, but this is a very important ingredient for the health of humanity. And frankly, our Western diet over the last 100 years has replaced too much omega-3 with vegetable oils and things like that that deny us those health benefits. So we think this is an ingredient to bet on the long term. As part of our strategy, we have taken positions both in omega-3s based on fish oil, as well as omega-3s based on microbial oil, so that we have a broad source of ingredients that is sustainable for the very long term. Now, in the business last year, we had clearly challenges, particularly in the North American dietary supplement market, which after a number of years, frankly 20 years of double-digit and high single-digit growth, has declined. That is due in part because of TV wars of personalities who take the latest study or make something out of it. So that is a temporary effect. We have pulled together an industry coalition under the industry association called GOET to educate people about the benefits. You can see the information on www.alwaysomega3.com. This campaign has actually been test marketed in Charlotte, North Carolina, has shown very good results, and in fact we have, based on that test market in the fall of last year, rolled that out in the last months, also nationally in the US. We expect a recovery of this, also of the US dietary supplement market based on that and other efforts. In addition to that, we are advancing our strategy to go more directly to retailers and engage with retailers, not only as an ingredient supplier, but supplying the finished product, the bottle with the omega-3 supplements. That is not an easy strategy, but we think it is the right strategy. So the ingredient is a very healthy ingredient. I think it's something we need to be in. Clearly, we have had challenges in the market, but we are addressing them quite aggressively, and we believe very much in the long-term future. Next to this dietary supplement business in the U.S., the dietary supplement business outside of the U.S. has continued to grow. And also the omega-3 business within infant nutrition is continuing to develop well. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Stephen. And before we proceed to the next speaker, I would just like to emphasize that this managing board and the supervisory board are constantly working on our portfolio, looking at the good and the bad parts of it. DSM is by excellence, really, the company that over the last 100 years has constantly kept a very close eye on its portfolio, has introduced important changes. That's one comment I'd like to make. And the other one is that we listen to all our shareholders, and we do so constantly, and our shareholders are offering very good suggestions. So then, there's no one shareholder is better than another. Next question, please. My name is Decker, and I'm representing the Association of Stockholders, VEB. My first question is to outline your strategic matters. What was the effect of, on your results of exchange rate fluctuations? I'm thinking about the Swiss franc, and what has been the impact on your profit? If you look back on the strategy of 2010, apart from the growth factors that were sort of overestimated in a great part of the world, what were the other weak points in your strategy that you have identified, I assume, and presumably by the end of the year would lead to an adjusted or different approach? My third question is, who are your main competitors in the nutrition market, and particularly regarding the Eco Plus products? Thank you. I don't know whether you were referring to currency effects in 13-14, which is the year under review. Yes, indeed, not 14-15. Well, yes, no, I'd like an explanation for the drop in profitability. Geraldine.
Even op de vertaling wachten.
I have a slight time delay here. If I understood your question correctly, you were asking about the foreign exchange impacts in 2014 on our results?
On let's say, the fall in profits. What was exactly the currency part, yes, and what was the E-vitamin part?
Okay, and for that year, the currency impact was around 50 million.
50?
50.
Yeah, thank you.
50. Yes, that's correct. Whereas the vitamin E part is primarily going to be impacting us this year in 2015 with an estimated impact of 80 million, 80.
Thank you.
De zwakke punten.
The weak points in the strategy. Well, I hope there are no weak points in the strategy, because that means that we would immediately have to review and rethink our strategy. But from time to time, developments don't help us. The growth in emerging markets is not really helping us. Brazil, Russia, they're growing at a different rate that we would have wanted and would have hoped for. And the growth in China seems to level off, even though it is at a very high rate if you compare it to the rest of the world. But I don't know whether that's a weak point, because ultimately, and that's what I try to say, Speaker, I accept that, Mr. Siebesma, and sorry, the nutrition business, yes, there we are dealing with headwinds. The food and beverage market worldwide hasn't done very well. The food supplements and omega-3, as Mr. Tanner just pointed out, has also suffered headwinds. And we are taking measures, as we have pointed out. But it's not a weak point of our strategy, because we don't really feel the need of changing our strategy. But from time to time, we'll have to respond to developments. And sometimes we'll have to cut costs. Sometimes we'll have to try to explain better to the market why it is that these products are so relevant. And this coalition that Stephen just referred to is very important. And then if you look at our figures, our results, and the challenge in our portfolio, that might be strategic challenge, is the caprolactam business, which is why we took deliberate steps in that respect. And I would say that from time to time we have to deal with headwinds, and we'll have to respond to that. We can't hide behind it, and we have to make clear what it is that we're doing, of course. And competitors, yes, sometimes headwinds are related to competitors. Stephen, could you perhaps point out who our main competitors are in nutrition, did you say, or what? In nutrition.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, maybe let me span it a little bit broader. You saw in Feike's presentation that the uniqueness of our nutrition business is that we are active at multiple steps in the value chain. And the competitive set is different depending which step in the value chain and which ingredient. So let me start with the first step where we make the active ingredient. The big category one is fat solubles. That's vitamin A, vitamin E, some of the carotenoids. There, the competitive set is we compete against BASF, two publicly traded Chinese companies, NHU and ZMZ, and then several smaller Chinese companies, Southwest, Baisha, and then the potential entrants. I think there, in terms of our environmental performance, we are second to none. That is something we're very proud of. We have a very not only low-cost process, but also environmentally a leading process there. Then when you go to the more water-soluble vitamins, excuse me, that's vitamin C, some of B vitamins, B1, B6, B2. As you know, we have the only facility in vitamin C in the West, in Dalry, Scotland, that has a very strong environmental record and competes very favorably with many of the Chinese facilities. Some of them increasingly get the pressure to shut down. In fact, one of the state-owned, we believe, is permanently down because of environmental performance. Then when you go into the omegas that I just talked about, you need to differentiate between fish-based and microbial. In microbial, we are by far the largest. In fact, in infant nutrition, we have a market share of more than 90%, and we produced it through biotechnology, a similar process that you saw is also used for the POET facility, so that is very much based on renewable resources, also with a strong environmental performance. And our fish oil business is based on sustainable fisheries that are very well controlled through the various governments that control the fisheries. And then last but not least, when I go downstream into our premix activities, those are very asset-light activities with very low environmental impact. So I think the overall performance of our nutrition business from a sustainability Eco Plus point of view is very good. Some of the highlights in our innovation pipeline are even more exciting. Let me just give you an example. I think we've mentioned before in our animal nutrition innovation pipeline, we have a product called, working name is Clean Cow, that reduces the methane emission from cows by up to 40%. And it looks like also increases the productivity. Now, methane is a very powerful, potent greenhouse gas. Roughly one cow equals one family passenger car in terms of annual emissions, and so you can imagine that alone agriculture contributes about 19% to global warming, so that is a very powerful product. Another innovation that we've talked about is stevia sweetener produced by fermentation that would replace plant-based stevia, which you cannot plant enough. There's not just enough arable land to make this a big product, versus if you make it via fermentation, as we have proposed, that is a much more sustainable product. So let's just give you a feeling for the kind of areas we're active in.
Thank you very much. I'd like to come back later with another series of
course,
questions.
you're welcome. Anybody else that I can give, please? No, one of...
Yes, my name is Henk Rings, And I would like to quickly put a number of things to you. First of all, you've done business with CVC, which is a well-known British investor. But I'm wondering, wouldn't it have been cleverer to do business with a party that was already in that market, the caprolactam market, with the Chinese, for instance? Because that way you could have synergies. Or Solvay in Brussels, your neighbor in Brussels, wouldn't they put up more money than an investor like this that in due course will just pocket the money and leave? And such a competitor, between brackets or inverted commas, would do a better job. DBX and 49%. Was that a deliberate decision? Because when push comes to shove, I mean, you'll have the short end of the stick. And are you happy with the 49%? Personally, I would prefer you to have 51%. And that way you'd have the long end of the stick if push comes to shove. You never know. You can always have a disagreement with this partner about, anything. And now, crude oil. Is that becoming less important for you? Oil, is that becoming less oil for you? How important is it for you as a fuel? What if the oil prices drop, as recently transpired? Or is this something that really doesn't play an important part for you as a company? Because I haven't heard you talk about oil prices. And what would you replace oil with palm oil or bioethanol, for instance? Because I would like to know how you would deal with that, because the disadvantage of oil is you extract it and it's not produced anymore in the ground. So recycling and all those things are simply not possible. You won't be able to achieve all these wonderful targets with the oil. And then finally, yesterday I visited a company called IMCD. You might be familiar with that company. And they are selling all these products that you are referring to here. Is IMCD an important partner for you? And can you point out more or less how much you are selling directly to clients that are using the ingredients in their own plants? I'm curious about that, because yesterday I heard Mr. van der Slikke's side of the story. So there are 4 questions. Yes, 4 questions, but that's it. I don't have to come back in a second round because I've ticked all the boxes on my list.
Well, with respect to the separation from caprolactam and ACN, we looked at various parties. We actually opened up the door for a number of parties that showed interest or that may show interest for those parts. And there were a couple of parties who did have interest in this part of our business. I cannot keep to myself, actually, that we didn't have a run for this part of the business because their profitability didn't really attract too many interested parties. There were a number, though. We looked into which one fit best, also strategy, and we examined whether that was in line with what we see as our strategy. We wanted industrial players, but possible antitrust problems played a role there, and that would incur the danger that they would have to sell off part of the business quickly afterwards. Those were logical, strategic partners, but it was proved difficult to arrive at a deal with them. All in all, we closed the deal with CVC, and the positive aspect there that Mr. Stevens was pointing to as well is that if the market grows, we at least still retain 35% and can generate value as well. Plus, we have an earnout. And if the market then works better, then part of that comes back to us. So what kind of agreements do you have with CVC if they want to step out? Because a party like CVC wants to step out of things at a certain point in time, and then a new partner will come forward. So there's no real continuity. Let me think loud and hard about this. Maybe this question goes a bit far, because we did set up an extensive contract, and not all parts of it are going to be publicized, and we will not discuss that thoroughly. We do have, of course, agreements with CVC that refer to possible exit situations and to DSM's role then. Also, with respect to the supply of caprolactam for our engineering, those are products that we've secured for us for a long period. But let me get back to CVC and DPX. With both of them, the same actually applies. If we have a minority interest, we always make agreements to protect the minority shareholder, which means that some issues cannot be decided with a simple majority of votes. Some aspects have to be decided with our approval. And that is true with DPX. The other party cannot really decide everything. Of course, a number of things. Yes, operational issues, we can't have too much input there. But sales and how things are going, important business things like acquisitions, etc., there, as a minority shareholder, we retain a voice. Comparable issues have been agreed upon with CVC. That has to do with the protection of our minority shareholding position. But if you have nothing to say in the end, then why not withdraw completely? So when push comes to shove, there is something to that point of view. As a minority shareholder, you may not have that much say. In the long term, a majority shareholder will have the say. And in the long term, DSM will probably then not be a shareholder anymore. But that this is the way in which we can create the most value for our shareholders during that course of time ahead. If we'd sold it at a certain point in time, we would have received 300 to 400 million, possibly, one-off thing. We've already indicated in our earlier publications that according to our idea, the market value is more than 1 billion. But I think the whole setup, therefore, benefits the shareholders in comparison to a one-off sale. Sometimes we have to look at a whole route of developments, and in the meantime, we have to ensure that our minority shareholding is secure. Then, oil. Oil is not unimportant, but has a different degree of importance than it used to have. If it had a direct influence on our bottom line, which is still the case, a lower oil price helps us a bit with transport costs and other costs that are lower, so a bit more profit if the oil price and when it is lower. Another aspect is that a number of raw materials that we need for our materials business come from oil. That means that their prices can be lower if oil prices decrease. But we pass on all of this practically immediately in the end product prices. The same is true for oil prices that rise. Then we pass that on as well. You will not see a margin effect. You do see a price effect. You can see sometimes that prices increase or decrease without having any effect on the margin in the end. For alternative energy sources, it's always important to have a high oil price because then their future is much better than the other way around. Well, EPCT, I'm not really sure what they do, I'm afraid, which actually indicates that our business relationship isn't really close. I did see their share price rising yesterday. That's where my knowledge stops. Possibly you can look at that. We can look into that offline. Well, specialty products, things that you're looking into, and the factory. Are there any kind of worldwide sales networks that you may share, or do you have any power to increase prices? You were saying that you're a world market leader in many areas, and then you actually do have the power to increase a price, even if you only add 3%. That can have a huge effect on profits. Yes, I agree fully. You can come up here and step into my role, because that's what I tell those gentlemen all the time. and the women, of course, in the management. If not a monopoly, so various competitors that actually influence prices and decrease them sometimes. Now, in all the products we have, we actually sell them directly. We don't have very many distributors. We have our own sales organization, just a few distributors, but less than in the past, which means we have a worldwide network. Our own people on site knowing the customer. And you're not doing what BASF is doing, where they sell via sales agents or distributors in all sorts of countries. They sell their products for all sorts of end products, paints, and all sorts of other things. I'm going to look into this with Mr. Fraser, but I've learned that I have to be very, very careful when I talk about EMCD or BASF or any other company. Well, I understand that, but as a loyal partner, I just want to brag a bit about my knowledge here, and I was happy to hear your opinion. The oil price, of course, determines the uplift or the downturn of the national gross national product by a couple of percent. The purchasing power of our customers change then. So that helps, I hope. Next question, please. My name is Swinkels. I'm from the city of Erp. Thank you very much for giving me the floor. Your presentation was clear, but leads to a question. DSM and Mr. Siebesma is regularly involved in trade missions that the Netherlands, our Prime Minister, and our King are actually involved in too. Now my question is, can Mr. Siebesma take us along with him and explain the successes of such trade missions in the past year? I have a question now about page 10, DSM Engineering Plastics. I'd like to know about the results with respect to the degradable plastic, Corbion and others. Makes me curious to read about that. And I'd like to understand whether DSM has any interest or can be a partner in Cordion. Can Cordion be a partner with DSM? And I had another question about the participation law. You are a company with about 22,000 employees worldwide in 86 countries, if I remember correctly. One of the countries you are present in is the Netherlands. And in the Netherlands, we have a new participation law. And what does that mean? Participation law means that underprivileged people with a distance to the labor market, as it is described in the Netherlands, are offered an opportunity with companies. And 5% of your staff will then have to come from that specific group of people. How do you include the stipulations of that participation law in your company? How do you deal with that? I'd like to hear more about that. Thank you. Well, those trade missions and the degradable plastics and your question about Corbion. Engineering Plastics 2 years ago introduced EcoPacks, degradable plastic, actually to produce parts in cars and replace metal. Lower weight, less fuel consumption was the great benefit. Second advantage was biodegradability. And then you could indeed use it in the circular economy. That is how we introduced it into the market under the brand name EcoPax. An innovation that needs time, that has to be developed further. What we've seen, though, is that the automotive industry, Daimler and BMW, are interested in the product, not really because it's biodegradable, but because it's strong and very lightweight product. We thought first it's a green one, that's interesting, that'll attract attention, but their attention's shifted. We're selling it because it's such a good product, and the green character of it is a nice bonus. We try to point out very clearly to the automotive industry that the greenness of this product is important, and we cooperate with a number of partners outside of DSM. Corbion is one of the important ones. A number of suppliers supply the building blocks of plastic, and Corbion is one of those. May I add on to that? Do you also use that in plastic packaging material? In various packaging together with aluminium or a foil, where you actually sort of puncture little holes into it, and then you can put it into your microwave and make a delicious dinner. Are you in that area as well? Yes, we're active there too. We talk about breathable packaging, where the packaging material indeed encloses the food with the vitamins that Stephen was advocating a minute ago. Now, then you try to filter sort of the whole exchange of air. It's a foil that we sell throughout the world for use in microwave. You can also use it in clothing. If you cycle yourself, then you will know about textiles, fabrics made that are breathable for sweating and rain. And surgeons have certain operating cloaks which indeed are breathable, and they can remain cool even though they're in an operating theater where it can become quite warm. You're very interactive and active there in developing such packaging products. There are developments, but I cannot say where we have the largest part of our sales. But if you look at innovation, the pipeline is films and packaging, a very important sector. But I haven't really heard too much about degradability now from you, where you're telling us that if you indeed throw it away, if it somehow enters the environment, then it has to be degradable. I saw the film on TV, and I saw a fish indeed eating all sorts of plastic waste that is swimming around in the world's oceans. I'm worried about degradability. How far are you there? We're looking at that in our innovation pipeline. It's one of our focus areas. You need 2 steps. You need a good film, and in the second step, the ingredients will have to be biorenewable, that you can reuse them. We're working on that. Innovation in the pipeline in automotive and packaging. Okay, thank you. Now the trade missions. Trade missions have a different character if you're a large international company or a smaller SME. In smaller and middle-sized enterprises, you can get an entrance into new countries where you're practically not active yet, and where you get a good introduction. That is not the case for us. We have a couple of thousand employees in China already. We know how to find our way around there. Still, it is important to put the Netherlands in the picture during such trade missions to such countries with the top of their economy or governance, specifically in China, India, Brazil. And if you bring along your king or your prime minister, that makes even more impact. And if you accompany them, then that is good support for the Netherlands. I see that as a responsibility of DSM to indeed stimulate and support the economy of the Netherlands. We're not always part and parcel of those trade missions. Sometimes a colleague joins or the local country manager. Another remark with respect to IMCD, it's our distributor or a distributor of us. We don't do all sorts of business with them, but we do work together with them. Then with respect to the participation law, I understood that the percentages are still an indication at this point in time. And looking at legislation for the year 2016, I believe more mandatory levels will be determined then. I'm looking around and I see some confirmation here from my management. There's no mandatory level yet. It can head down that road. In the meantime, we see ourselves as a responsible employer, and we want to offer people a future through traineeships, internships, jobs. We invest a lot into that, not only to younger people that are looking for jobs and other job seekers too, to see to it that people have full opportunities when they work for and with us, and we invest into their development. Chair, may I understand from this that you're waiting for legislation to become sharper, or are you already working on implementation? You're also part of the economy of the Netherlands, as you just said, with respect to the trade missions. But your answer with respect to the participation law is not sufficient in my mind. You have to set an example. You're quite right. If you're looking at age-related education and enabling people to remain active at various ages, also integrating all sorts of employees and job seekers. That is something that we don't have to wait the law to make any prescriptions for us. We take our own responsibility there, and we are working on it. But you will have to see that in perspective. You will understand that important technical departments cannot consist of more than so many percent of underprivileged or low-qualified employees, because then we won't be able to achieve any kind of profit, and we need people with a lot of expert knowledge who can actually work anywhere in the world, a talent that we have to recruit and that we need very much. At the same time, we do take our responsibility. If you want to talk to the one who is responsible for this area in the Netherlands, I will invite him next time and you can have a chat and go into the details then. Ilonka de Beer, I speak on behalf of the Association of Shareholders for Sustainable Development, the VBDO. We would like to compliment and congratulate you on this great annual report and the good performance you've shown. We're very happy to see that sustainability plays such a major role and actually contributes to the value of the company and of our society. We see all of that in the margins that you achieve in the Eco Plus products you just mentioned. You have sustainability in the assessment and remuneration of your management employees. That's a question that we ask of various other companies, but we don't always get such a good answer as we receive from you. Other areas of interest, circular economy, climate change, sustainable supply chains, etc., are what interest us. I have questions with respect to climate change. This is an area of concern. We are very happy to see that DSM addresses this, and you do that regularly, amongst others, in the book that you've written. At the same time, the scenario ahead, 3 to 4 degrees of warming DSM has a long-term goal stated in their annual report, 25% reduction in CO2 emissions as per 2020. My question is, will this goal remain, or will it be even increased, be made more ambitious in your new strategy? Now, 2014 compared to 2008, only a 2% improvement. So I do wonder how you want to achieve the 25% reduction as per 2020. My second question, circular economy. And in that connection, the strategy update becomes relevant again. One of the parts of the circular economy is the zero waste ambition. No landfill, no burning of waste. We can tell that you've achieved quite a lot. You report a reduction of 51% in Kingston and Laurie. But my question is, will you have a more ambitious goal in your new strategy? Is it possible to include zero waste, as many other companies have done? Unilever and Nestle are two examples. I'd like to hear your answer there. My last question pertains to circular economy as well and the new models developed there. You write about Niagara, a development in carpets where only one polyester yarn is being used in future. Right now, various ingredients for the backing, etc., the carpeting and the glue, and I believe that is a very important development, because then we have one material which facilitates recycling. My question, are you thinking of new circular business models? Is it possible for DSM to remain the owner of polyester grains and therefore has more input in the whole chain? Indeed, climate change is an extremely important topic. I can only emphasize what you've said already. It is quite sad to have to see that the models we've been using to date, 2 degrees of warming, we cannot accept anything else. Now we have to admit that value will be higher, and we do have to join forces to do everything we can to prevent that. We have to deal with this differently. With respect to the goals set, you've already indicated that we're right in plan. We want to attain our old goals, but as per the end of the year, I've looked into this in the past months, but it's not according to our expectations to go backwards in any of this and to set ourselves lesser goals. So that's at least not what our expectation is. You're not going to indicate anything, 30 or 40%, but then you're going to compare things, says Mr. Sibisama. I cannot give you an indication at all, because from there you will deduct or infer too much. We also have a couple of steps to take to bring this about, and we're working on that. Let me just ask again, the 20%, 2020, are you going to achieve that? Well, the targets we've set, we are going to achieve. Second question about circular economy. We're working on it from 2 points of view. We're going to reduce our own waste, Kingsley and Delray, dramatic decrease, and also use waste from third parties. That's what we do in our factory in the US. We use the waste that the farmers usually throw away. We collect it, and we make biofuel. Another example, the foils we produce for solar panels, had a lot of discussions there with a number of our customers. How does that work? Who is going to then separate that foil from the solar panels? Who's going to reuse that, etc.? And we said, well, we'll sell them, we'll collect them, we remain the owners, we're going to use it, and half of that is profit is for you, and the other half is for us. This is the circular economy in which the producer remains owner of his own products, and he sells the goals that you want to achieve with those products and not the products themselves. I'm glad to hear that you are so enthusiastic about Niaga. We are quite happy about it as well. 2 reasons. It's an example in which we pool our knowledge with Niaga, which was an individual company. We now have a joint venture. We will then go to one system, polyamides or polyester, and a glue that we used to have. We want to develop a water-based glue and a system which actually reuses the carpets. We developed a machine that can reuse it. We talked about the full value chain because we had the insight that if we're not going to develop the machine ourselves, then the industry will tell us, well, the idea is good, but how are we going to go about it? So we have a cooperation to develop the machines, to develop the glue and the carpets. We were thinking about how to launch that into the market as quickly as possible. It's good for circular economy, but it's also good for you as a shareholder with a certain profit expectation. We believe it is best to include all players in the market, not to do all of this ourselves. We put it on the net with an open innovation effort, developed a license, the same as we show in other areas where we just show on a smaller scope how it works and then offer it to everyone. Now, the large carpet manufacturers of this world, Deso is now being taken over by Tarkett, but also others from the US are at our doors. We have intentions to roll it out and to use the structures existing already in the industry. That's the way you evolve, says Mr. Siebesma, and learn more.
At the back, and then you're next. Thank you very much for allowing me to come back. First question is China. China, in terms of sales, seems to develop nicely. What is the profit level right now? POET, in 2013, you said that the estimated break-even would be approximately $65 the barrel. Question is, are we achieving that? Or do you think we'll achieve it? In terms of cost price. And then we see that employee satisfaction is stagnating, albeit at a high level. What are the most important barriers for moving on to 80, for instance? That would be interesting. And then I have 2 more questions about risk management. Can you return later on for these questions then? That's fine. Profitability in China is just below the average at DSM. Prices of a number of products are slightly lower in China than they are on world markets. But almost all divisions, all product groups operate in China, some more than others. So you'll find a representation of DSM worldwide in China. So we have almost all our operations there, sometimes at lower price levels and margin levels. If we import in China, if we produce locally in China, obviously our cost price will be better and comparable, or perhaps even better. By and large, I think it's slightly lower. POET, yes, indeed. A lower oil price, doesn't make things any easier for us. Bioethanol, second energy, is competing with gasoline, oil derivatives, so the lower oil price is making things more complicated. Ultimately, I believe, but once again I have to be very careful to say anything about oil with the chairman next to me with the Shell backgrounds, but I will venture to do so nonetheless. In the long term, we do believe that the oil price will increase again and that there'll be an adjustment or correction in the market. Actually, that's what I hope as well. So that means that we'll get through this. At the same time, our technology enjoys great interest in China and India, not only because it's more competitive, but also because these countries want to become more energy independent. They don't want to import as much energy and also want to upgrade their waste and then move on in terms of sustainability. So even if sometimes it's slightly more expensive, I do believe that we have a clean future ahead of us. And I'd like to refer to what the speaker from the VBDO, the Sustainability Organization, said about global warming being within the 2 degrees. A bit more specific, says the speaker. What about the $65 a barrel in terms of cost price? Will you achieve that? Mr. Siebesma, where did you get the 65 from? You mentioned it in 2013, says the speaker. Mr. Siebesma, I thought it was, I said something a bit lower. 60 to 70, you said, so I took an average. I don't know, I don't think so, but what I said something in September in the US. At that point, the oil price was 105, and I said 70, 80. Everybody said, well, that price is very low. If you can't even be competitive at that low oil price, and that's what I said at the time. So we should be able to make it at those prices. Our technology, our enzyme fermentation technology is well on track, is ahead of what we expected. So I think that we can be quite competitive. But if the oil remains at an oil price of 50 for a long period of time, I mean long period of time being 5 or 10 years, so if the oil price stays around this price of 50, it'll mean that we have to cycle a lot faster. But these, you have time until 2020 or something like that. Yes, but you never know what the government's going to do. And the American government, at this point in time, is playing a bit with the statements as to what to do and how this will pan out. So I agree. Yeah. Employee satisfaction is stagnating, as you said, correct? But as you said, it is nonetheless at quite a high level. So we have quite a motivated set of employees and engaged employees. And actually, the most important word of advice would be a thing that we're working on with our own people is to perhaps here and there spend less time on email, in sending emails, and spending a bit more time meeting with management, sharing information. This is something we're suffering from at DSM. Not only DSM, but many other organizations. There's a lot of pressure, computers, social media, email, so on and so forth. And from time to time, it would be important for people to spend a bit more time with their co-workers. I'm sure this applies to everybody, and I would be one of them. I wouldn't venture to say that I'm not part of them. Mr. Spagna, I saw you there. Mr. Decker will be back with you later on. Yes, Mr. Chairman. I have a fan here at the table. My name is Spagna, indeed, as you said, for the minutes. I do have a couple of questions based on the presentation. I hope I can ask those questions. Something was said about the automotive industry, Mercedes and things like that, but those are cars. What about lorries? What about the market of lorries? Do you have any contacts there? And what about the competition of Tenkate? Because they also want this access to the automotive market. What about that competition? Do you work with Tenkate? Tenkate is also involved in carpet production. And Tenkate says that Desso is a tiny player. And did Desso ask you to join forces against Tenkate? And then my next question is, I believe that DSM stands for Sustainable Partnership with in Dutch. The same letters for, are Dutch for Sustainable Partnership. I think that's a good thing. Anyway, my third question is, but what was your second question? You said something about the acronym. No. DSM stands, or could also stand for Sustainable Partnership. I think you're working more on sustainability than you are with coal. Anyway, you said in China we have smaller vitamin E players that we want to smoke out. Our company in Switzerland is a company that we want to expand, and that's how you're going to smoke them out. What about your safety? What about cybercrime security? Because China is most probably #1 in that ranking. How did you secure your IT systems? Okay, thank you. Those are my first questions. Chairman, Dimitri, perhaps you could say a few words not only about Mercedes but also about lorries. And Tinkata, I would be very cautious here in this AGM. All of a sudden we're mentioning all these names of other companies, and I would be very cautious about talking about relationships with other companies, because otherwise I get the feeling that we're doing all these AGMs at once. Dimitri, in this context, first the lorries before addressing Tinkata. Lorries have the same dynamics as automotive, but more linked to industrial operations, but the same trends regarding lower weights for lorries, better materials, material substitution plays a part there, engines that have to generate more power or the same power with fewer cylinders. So that applies there. So innovation and product development applies there as well. But dynamics is slightly different. You may have seen in the crisis a long, long time ago that lorry manufacturing dwindled, whereas cars, the production of cars was still at a certain level. Well, Tankata, I don't really want to say too much about that. It's an appreciated client of ours, more a client than anything else. Over the last few days, I read in the newspaper on a number of occasions the Dutch coal company, and people didn't understand what it actually stood for. Dutch coal company, the D, nobody understood what the D would stand for, but it came from Dutch state mines, or de staatsmijnen, and then initially it was direction or management state mines. That is what it started with, but now we just call it DSM. And I like your interpretation. Doing something meaningful is something that other people also say, so I like your definition too. Indeed, I do read in the newspaper that some people say that we want to smoke out other Chinese companies. We never use those words, and I don't know exactly what the English translation is, smoking out. I don't think so, but we have said, nonetheless, that we have some major and some minor competitors in China, and that we're not prepared to give up any volume or market share. So that may lead to pressure on prices, but so be it. We're not going to give in on volumes. We're not going to give it away. And this has led to price reduction. And as we expected, 2 smaller Chinese companies reported a loss, and the 2 larger Chinese companies reported a drop in profit. So let the strongest prevail in the market. That is our strategy. Our cybercrime. Yes, of course. We do keep a close eye on our systems, IT systems, that they be properly secured. You never know in these difficult times, because technology evolves very rapidly. I'd like to take the opportunity to comment on what the previous speaker said about participation society. We have 40 to 50 young people, underprivileged young people, so not waiting for the development of the law. We're taking action. Speaker. The media also reported that you are going to increase production in your plant in Switzerland. No, we're not going to increase it deliberately. Thing is that the market is growing, and we are holding on to our market share, which means that we may be producing a bit more, but that's slightly different. In practice, it may boil down to the same thing, but it's slightly different. It's not that we're deliberately increasing production to smoke people out. No, but we are holding on fiercely to our market share. Don't always believe the media. The newspaper also said that the Transavia AGM was to be held next week, which is not the case. Slowly but surely, I'd like to move to the last questions, and if there are no urgent questions, I'd like to point out that all the members of the management team are available after the meeting. If you have specific questions about this product or that product, please speak with the appropriate members of the managing board or the supervisory board. Yes, by way of conclusion, risk management. Now, if I have read these paragraphs correctly, it is my impression that your review has led to the fact that the risk profile of DSM has become somewhat lower. Is that correct? Do you have a lower risk profile?
Speak if I don't hear myself at the same time. Thank you very much for raising this subject. Risk management is an extremely important topic for us. As I believe has been discussed at many AGMs before, we have a very comprehensive process to not only identify risks, but also to mitigate them, and sometimes also to use that exercise to identify opportunities, both for us, but also for the people that we provide services and products to. Now, overall, you are right to say that thanks to this very comprehensive process, we believe that we are keeping very good grip on our risk, and as such, one could conclude from that that the risk management has improved or that the risk level has decreased.
Well, that's very important, of course. The second question is, I have read that you fear a potential deterioration in the world of energy, water, climate, and noticing your enormous successes in planet and people, not yet in profit, I must say, but anyhow, I would say there's the opportunity. There must be an opportunity to handle the problems better than the competition, of course, from your position.
Ja, ik denk dat we dat doen.
Well, I think that this is precisely what we're doing. This is precisely what we're doing. Some people say part of the misery of the world or your opportunities, that is perhaps a bit too black and white or too black. The problems of the world, yes, in fact, do offer opportunities for us. And if you look at what it is that we're doing in solar energy, second generation biofuels, alternative energy sources, these are things that we need desperately. What Dimitri is doing, lighter cars, greener electronics with our products. We see that everything that has to do with climate and energy leads to opportunities indeed for us, and the problems of the world offer challenges for us that and we benefit in terms of revenues. And what Stefan and his people are doing in the field of nutrition is also very important. I said so this morning. 50% of the medication that people take worldwide as medication for illnesses that we have created ourselves. The situation is entirely different than 30 years ago, where the percentage was around 25%. So there is room for improvement to make life a lot better, and in part we're making money with that. You're correct, Speaker. So a very positive risk and not a negative risk, because it felt like it was a negative risk. Mr. Siebesman, well, of course, there are concerns, and this is what the previous speaker referred to. If you look at the scenarios that we have in front of us here in terms of climate particularly, and this is something that personally I'm quite worried about for my own children and the next generation. I mean, if we see that we're moving to 2 to 4 degrees worldwide, and sometimes even in excess of 4 degrees, and that is going to materialize sooner or later. It's going to have an enormous impact on all of us and also on this company, and there's no escaping it, and that's what we're worried about, and this can impact all companies and also our own company. At the same time, we're doing our best to turn the tide, but of course we can't turn the tide for the entire world. Thank you. I think that it's time to stop with the questions, and there are no people who would like to ask questions anymore, so I can close this item on the agenda. In the meantime, I have the information on the attendance of this meeting, and I can inform you today at this AGM, 99 shareholders are present or represented. A total, we have a share capital of 123,730,909 ordinary and cumulative preference shares A, being 71.14% of subscribed capital that is entitled to vote. I can further inform you that the civil law notary for the different resolutions has received a number of proxies and voting instructions. These proxies concern a total of 89 million shares, which accounts for 71.76% of the capital represented and present at the meeting, and these votes have been included and incorporated in the electronic voting system. Right, so we can proceed to item 3, implementation of the Managing Board Remuneration Policy 2014. Mr. Kiss, the chairman of the Remuneration Committee, will explain the remuneration policy of the Managing Board 2014, and this explanation is based on the information about this policy that you'll be able to find in the remuneration report and the explanatory note to the financial statements. After the explanation, there will be opportunity to raise questions. Ewald. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is a standing item on the agenda, the remuneration policy of the Managing Board. It may be important to highlight that remuneration is not executed by the Managing Board. It is a decision of the Supervisory Board. And the media sometimes portray this differently, but it is the Supervisory Board that decides on remuneration of the Managing Board, and I'd like to report on that now. Let's go back to basics. In 2010, all of you agreed to a new system, and a number of changes in 2013 were also approved by the AGM. So that is the structure that we have, and the premises are that in remuneration, all stakeholders have to be represented: people, planet, profit. Stakeholder-driven. We want a fair salary system that is in line with market, that is competitive, and then we look at the European and Dutch market, not so much the US market, and we focus on the median of all these partners. And there are guidelines for that, and we have the shareholdership. The chairman's 3 times his basic salary, and the other members 1 times basic salary, and this is so that it runs parallel with your interests. The second sheet actually says that the basis for everything is the base salary of the members of the Managing Board, and we do this on the 1st of July, in the middle of the year. Last year, on the 1st of July, the chairman and other members of the Managing Board received an increase of 1.8, 1.9%, very modest. And for this year, for the next year, sorry, you may be interested in what we intend to do as per July 1st. At this point in time, all cost reduction systems and programs are running, and even though there may be a possibility to increase the base salary considerably, the Managing Board has requested that we skip this year, and the Supervisory Board agreed that on the 1st of July there be no increase of the base salary of the Managing Board. I'm going to take you along to the second part of the remuneration. So we have the base salary, and then we have short-term remuneration and long-term. Short-term variable remuneration. I'm not saying bonus, it is remuneration. It's part of remuneration. We would like to link this to the goals, the targets that we have set, and here we have a sheet that outlines our system. Short term is 1 year, and here for 50%, so for half we have financial targets, and the other half we have sustainability targets, which as such is quite exceptional. So to put it differently, we have a financial threshold, so assuming that all the sustainability targets have been met, but the financial targets have not been met and were really poor, then we said, okay, then perhaps you shouldn't. You should have a sort of minimum threshold that we achieved last year. So this is the system, and you see that we focus on 3 financial elements: profit, free cash flow, and the growth of the company and sustainability. We also have 3 elements: eco plus, safety, and employees. And then in conclusion, we also have the individual targets for the individual members of the Managing Board that we review at year end. Now, what has transpired in the year under review in terms of short-term remuneration? You may know that the Managing Board, if they achieve all short-term targets, they get 50% of their base salary. That is what they can earn. And if it's extremely good, 100%. What has been the realization of this year under review? 33.5% on average, so below 50%. So that means that they didn't achieve all the targets, but I'm sure that that is what you will have gleaned from the financial targets. Financial targets are remain below the target, below the threshold, and we have the factor of the exchange rates, the Swiss franc, US dollar, and the euro. Situation may be different this year, but last year this was a negative factor regarding the financial targets. Sustainability. Now, in this respect, they did well, in part in excess of the targets, sometimes slightly below, and the individual targets, as you will understand, is quite different from individual to individual. The extraordinary thing about DSM, something that is you won't see with our peers, that out of the short-term variable remuneration, that from this number, 25% has to be converted into shares, performance shares. This is mandatory. And they can do another 25% of their cash variable remuneration that can be spent on shares as well. Last year, all members of the managing board converted the maximum in the form of deferred shares. So that's a good thing. That's a good thing, particularly for the shareholders that are in this business for the long term. So part of the short-term variable remuneration has been converted into long-term shares. And that is quite extraordinary for DSM. And the other thing is that these shares that are going to start running for a couple of years, in 3 years' time, once all sorts of targets are met, these shares can also be matched, and then they will be given an additional share if the long-term targets are met. So it's an additional incentive for the members of the managing board to convert their cash variable remuneration into shares. Moving on to long-term remuneration, here at the bottom, once again, you see an outline of the system, which once again is quite extraordinary. It's typically DSM. Half of this remuneration is linked to financial targets and the other half sustainability targets. And this is, as I said, quite unique. I would even venture to say that this is rather modern. Financial targets, TSR, total shareholder return, and here we compare ourselves with 15 or 20 peers, and then we look and see what the performance is of DSM. And also we look at return on capital employed. These are the financial targets. Sustainability is reduction of greenhouse emissions and energy efficiency. So all this starts running for a period of 3 years, and now I'm at the top of the page. They can get 50% of their base salary here. That is if they meet all these targets. And then, for instance, last year, the chairman of the managing board, 24,000 shares were given, and they start running, then they either increase or decrease in value. And for this year, 2015, we are starting a new three-year period, and 29,000 shares have been earmarked for the chairman and 19,000 for the members. So that'll be running for a period of 3 years. Now, if you would ask me what happened in 2014, you'd have to go back 3 years in time, starting in 2011, 12, and 13, and then in 14 we settle accounts. We look at how they've done in terms of all these targets, and last year this led to the following: that they only achieved half of aforementioned targets. The financial targets in those 3 years have not been met. So they haven't done that well. That's not news for you. Won't be news for you. So that's 0. Sustainability targets have been met. So that would lead to half of the 50% of their base salary. So this way you can see how it works. So this, in short, is my presentation. Not very much has changed as compared to last year. You'll find it all in detail in the annual report, so you can read it yourself, and I'll be happy to answer any questions. Any questions for Mr. Kist? Michiel van Es, I work for Rebecca, and I'm speaking on behalf of the parties that I mentioned earlier on. Thank you very much for this crystal clear presentation. Last year, we asked you for more transparency concerning the performance targets of the annual bonus and the performance and results. And this year, DSM is reporting in a very transparent way in this respect. So my compliments for that, and thank you very much for listening to our request. Furthermore, in the annual report, we read that DSM is encouraging its supervisory directors to purchase shares. And it's quite uncommon in the Netherlands for supervisory directors to hold shares. It could be an incentive, but at the very same time, it's very important that the supervisory board be impartial. And members of the managing board have a different duty than members of the supervisory board. What are the measures DSM is taking in order to make sure that supervisory directors continue to operate impartially under any conditions, any circumstances? Thank you very much, and I'm very, very pleased with your compliments. This is a very complicated situation. It's always a matter of how much information you want to disclose about all your targets. Last year, I said that this does have a sensitive side. Last year, I said that we're not going to disclose everything, but I'm very pleased that you're happy with the formulation that we chose in the annual report. So that's great. It's a good step forward for DSM, so thank you very much for your kind words. The matter of supervisory directors holding shares or not, please don't forget that we have all sorts of nationalities in our board, and it's quite uncommon in the Netherlands. It's not done, perhaps, it's not prohibited, but in the Netherlands, the law says that all stakeholders must be served, and not only shareholders. But in other countries, it's different. It's much more shareholder-focused in other countries. Anyway, what we did is we reflected on this, and we thought, yes, well, let's go ahead with this because it's quite common in other countries, US, for instance. So we decided to go ahead with that. So that's novel in the Netherlands. And I would even venture to say that's typical for DSM to do something new. It's not forbidden. How can you make sure that there's no tampering and that we don't forget about other stakeholders before someone buys or sells shares? The supervisory director will have to check with the company, with the compliance officer, whether there's no problem, and so on and so forth. The fact that someone wants to have shares in DSM, and I just said in remuneration, it's not only about financials, but especially about sustainability. So someone who's prepared to invest in DSM shares accepts the fact that there are non-financial elements, 50% are non-financial elements. So we're not that worried about that. Buying and selling shares is something that we're covering, but it's not forbidden to have shares in DSM now, even though the situation was very different a couple of years ago. And the Dutch supervisory directors don't have shares. I had to sell them at the time because I had some shares. I had inherited shares from my father. I had to sell them at the time. We think that's old-fashioned. So we have embarked on a new and fresh path, and I hope that at some point in time you learn to appreciate that, because we wanted to act in parallel with you as shareholders. That's my answer. Thank you, Ewald. I think that's an excellent explanation. In our view, it is important that supervisory directors have a stake in the company. And if there's one company that keeps a very close eye on all its stakeholders, it's DSM. And ultimately, you will decide how we perform. A question.
Vraag slechts, wij zijn ietsjes...
Just one question. We're a bit stricter than the consortium of investment institutions. And we're looking at the trust and the green field that is been paid out, the threshold, excuse me. You were saying in previous years that you would be able to mention the threshold. At 33%, obviously this threshold is much lower. Is that 20? Is it 10? It was 33% that was paid out financially. And the financial has a threshold above which, where is that threshold? Not 33%. That is a totally different calculation. What we believe is important, and this is also a figure that we're not going to announce because otherwise we'd go into too much detail, but we do stipulate a number, and then the profit has to be quite substantial, not 33% or anything like that. It's a different number. We aim at a budget that is so high, and then we take part of that as a minimum. It's not as low as you think, and 33% is a totally different number. It's not 20% either, but I'm not going to tell you more about our budget for the next year. I hope you'll understand that. Well, the deliberation of 2 years ago, was that voted off? Well, at that point in time, you promised to make it public, to announce it with respect to previous years. Well, we've thought about that, and we're not going to announce it. Thank you. Another question. My name is Vinkels. I'm from ERP. I don't really have a question. I do have a remark, and I'd like to go back to the minutes of last year's meeting. I said then, and I stick to that everything should be simplified. And you are responsible for this presentation. And the previous person who asked the question said it's all understandable. I expect that he has more knowledge than I do, but I don't really understand any of this. Mr. Kist gave a presentation, and what astonishes me is also that the dollar has such an influence, and in the buyback of obligations, of bonds. The euro decreases, the dollar increases. That has an influence on the board of managers. Who invented this? You will have to go to the European Central Bank and tell them, buy up all those bonds, and then we get things go the other way around. But these people are being remunerated for something that we have no control of. And I'm wondering what is going on here. I do have a remark with respect to the green part of all of this. Mr. Siebesma elaborated on that. I support that fully. We are thinking of the next generations, of the generations of our grandchildren. We have to be sustainable. Sustainability is self-explanatory, actually. You don't have to reflect that in targets and in remuneration. I expect that you in your own homes are sustainable. I mean, the organization sustainability there is one thing, but when you're at home, when you're under the shower, you try to act sustainable there. And our royal family says that too. Children are much more critical of their parents. They will tell them, you can only take a shower for 7 minutes, so you have to think of our future. So I don't understand this whole system. It has to be simplified, much easier to understand. I'd like to ask you, try to take this to the higher level, look at the remuneration structure again. You're not going to use the word bonuses. I'm not going to use that word either. But there has to be support in society. There has to be approval from all stakeholders, and I think that is missing. May I react? You talk like a real DSM person, a former staff member possibly? You think that sustainability has to be in everyone's mindset. But I would like to point to the fact that we come from a past, from a history where shareholders and profit generation was at the top of our minds. We're not a Dutch company anymore. We've come a long way. We've evolved. We have worldwide activities. We have other nationalities sitting here on the dais. Our remuneration policy has to adapt to that situation. Otherwise, we won't be able to attract foreign nationalities of any talent anymore. We tried to simplify and structure things. If you don't really understand my presentation, I do hope you can take more information from the annual reports presentation. Thank you very much. Of course, it is also important that we don't change our remuneration policy each and every year. It's been around for a couple of years. You have approved it as shareholders group. We'll have to review it regularly. We have to look at its clarity. Thank you for your remarks in that respect. More questions, please. My name is Stevens. Short-term incentive in shares, we cannot find at what point in time those shares will be distributed. I can't remember from the top of my head, but there's someone in the first row who knows exactly when. Please turn to the microphone. My name is Stefan Mechelmans. I am responsible for remuneration policy, and I can tell you that this happens in the next year in the first quarter, and the date is 31 March. 2015, end of March for the year 2014. Thank you, that's clear. Maybe it would have been better to include that in your report, in your presentation. But you know about it now, yes, but I'm just making a suggestion. And I was supposed to simplify. Well, we examined the report and couldn't really find it, and we'd expected it from the presentation, but Mr. Kiss didn't really mention a date. Now, Ewald, remember this for next time. Other questions, ladies and gentlemen? That is not the case. We'll continue in our agenda. I see that there are no further questions. I will close this agenda item and proceed to agenda item 4, annual report, financial statements of 2014. We would like to present it to this general meeting. It has been approved by the Supervisory Board on the 2nd of March 2015. You will find the financial statements and all explanatory notes from page 120 in the annual report. Everything was audited by our auditors. You will see their report and opinion on pages 200 to 203. I'd like to offer Mr. Arnink the opportunity now to say something about their audit procedures at Ernst & Young. Before I do that, I must indicate to you that Ernst & Young has been our auditors since 1967, which is quite a long time. It is an era. We've always appreciated their critical points of view, their constructive attitude. We've always been supported by their audit procedures. I'd like to give Mr. Arnink the floor now. If you have questions, you can follow up after his presentation. Thank you, Chair, for these friendly words, and good afternoon to you all. I would like to use this opportunity to explain the audit activities we have executed for DSM and their integrated annual report 2014. It is the Supervisory Board and the Management Board to look into the issues of the business and the contents of the financial statement, as well as the quality assurance system. I am going to discuss the audit, and I am very prepared to answer any questions you may have. I have a change to point out to you. We have a report new style that is obligatory since this year. You will find it on pages 200 and following, and it discusses 3 important issues: materiality, the scope of the group audit, and the key audit matters. Let me discuss materiality first. That is with respect to misstatements of financial figures at DSM without having to change the auditor's opinion. We looked at it and determined it at 44 million euro. Most of the audit procedures, by the way, take place at a much lower materiality level, and that is certainly true for qualitatively sensitive positions, as, for example, management remuneration. Audit differences larger than 1 million euro are reported to the Audit Committee. The scope of our audits. We determine first what the most important developments and risks are that can influence the financial statements. On the basis of that assessment, we determine how many and which subsidiaries and reporting units are to be audited. We decided in this year to audit 54 in total. These audit procedures were done by Dutch or foreign Ernst & Young auditors. A small part of them have been audited by component auditors such as KPMG. We visit the locations. This year we discussed issues in the United States, China, Singapore, and Switzerland, and we talked through developments with the management and the local auditors there. What are the key audit matters? They are the core points that we discuss, the most significant ones, which we indeed discuss with the audit committee. One is the valuation of tangible and intangible assets, specifically fiber intermediates. DSM has done an impairment of their caprolactam activities to the amount of 291 million euro as per 31 December 2014. This was because of the development and the assessments DSM made of the market. We have looked into this with our valuation expert and have assessed whether this impairment is in line with the so-called value in use. We've used the business plans to support this, the expected revenue flow, the expected investments, and the interest rate. Furthermore, the disposition of the pharma sector to DPX, we discussed that earlier on. This was a transaction started in 2013, but wrapped up and concluded in 2014, and therefore received special attention from the auditors. Furthermore, we believe that that is the next point. The assessment of deferred tax positions was a key audit matter because of the subjective or judgmental aspects of this position, and the valuation deals with expectations and future profits. On the basis of all of these audit procedures, we can agree with the way in which these positions were included and explained in the annual accounts. We would like to point out that we found that the required explanations with respect to corporate governance have been included in the report as well. We found that all data included are in consistency with the data we found in our audit procedures. We've included a separate assurance report also with respect to the non-financial data, for example, sustainability information. And you will read in more detail, starting on page 214, what kind of activities we executed in that respect. We have an open and transparent relationship with the management, the internal auditors and accountants, the audit committee, and the supervisory board. We report frequently about our findings in a written and an oral manner. We also consult with the audit committee without presence of management team members, and I personally have face-to-face contact regularly with the chair of the audit committee. We further given written reports to the audit committee about important issues such as our impartiality, the continuity of automated information systems, our vision on important estimates, and of course the key matters and results of our audit. I would like to conclude. We've always done our work with a lot of enthusiasm and a lot of engagement without losing our impartiality. DSM has always been a company that has been involved in change, has gone through a huge transformation, which was very interesting for us as well. We would now like to hand over our task to KPMG. They have participated as observers and listeners in the closing process for 2014. They understand the processes and activities. This is a good start. We are proud of being part of your company, having been part, and thank you for the trust you placed in us. Well, thank you for this explanation, Mr. Arning. Are there questions? Thank you, Chair. My name is Stevens of SEB. When you visit companies abroad, what are your criteria of selection? And a new auditor will also work for other companies, but I would like to understand why you specifically visited those companies you've selected. Our selection criteria are risk profiles and size of those companies and also the auditors. We went to America because KPMG is the auditor there. We went to China because it's a different culture and important investments for DSM, and that is only an example of the various criteria we take into consideration. Was that an answer to your question? Thank you. Next question. Yes, my name is Swinkels. Possibly this is a rude question, but still I do believe justified. Have employees changed from one auditing company to the next to make this as transparent as possible? That did not happen. And I also hope that that will not happen, to be quite honest. In the Netherlands, this is musical chairs of auditors that go from one company to the next because everyone had to change accountants at the same point in time. I hope that this will improve in future. But I must say that the transfer of tasks to KPMG has taken place in an exceptionally good manner, and there was full opportunity to hand over, and I would like to thank Ernst & Young for all they have done for us again. There are no further questions, ladies and gentlemen. Do we need a break? That should have been the test or trial question for the voting device. Let's take 10 minutes. We'll come back at 16:30 at 4:30, please.
Een vraag over de jaarrekening gehad? Nee.
Een pauze van 8 minuten. Ja, dat is goed. Pauze 10 minuten.
Op mijn klokje zelfs maar 5.
Heb je een vraag over de jaarrekening gehad?
Als je ze meer geeft, dan zijn ze nog niet terug.
Hebben jullie alle vragen over de jaarrekening gehad?
Welke? Wat?
Hebben jullie alle vragen over de jaarrekening gehad of alleen over de accounting?
Dat weet ik. Ik zag geen vragen meer.
Ik denk dat er nog heel veel wees zeker nog vragen over de jaarrekening.
Oké, ik zeg goed dat je dat zegt. Ik zal het even terug.
Ik denk dat je zou opgesteld kunnen zeggen. Naast even het accountantstuk wat nu behandeld is.
Nou, even kijken. Okay. All right. Ik wil weer graag beginnen.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to start. Let's resume the meeting and get back to agenda item 4. We've heard from the auditor. I'd like to know whether you have any further questions with respect to the financial statements of 2014 in general. Mr. Stevens. He is looking through his papers. Thank you, Chair. My name is Stevens of the SRB. 500 million is what you cashed through issuing bonds and 10 years period which will end soon. We're happy to have the banks on board in this respect. Did they play a special role, receive any kind of special information? We'd like to know a bit more about the background of this action. Geraldine, please.
Yes, you're referring to the issuance of the bond that we did early this year.
Yeah.
Yes, so correctly, we have a bond that is maturing in September 2015, so we had to refinance that. This was done in absolutely the normal practice way. We had 3 banks that did a lot of the work for us, placing it on the market, and we're very happy with the outcome. As it reflects the trust in DSM. When you see that for 10 years of money you can bring it in for 1% coupon, that reflects that the market out there is very comfortable with the risk profile of the company. So, other than that, nothing special to report.
Maar wat we ook graag willen weten, dat is de informatie.
What I'd like to know more about is the information that DSM gave to the banks.
Banks.
Meer dan aan de...
Did you give more information to the bank than to shareholders?
Okay, apologies for not completing the answer. There is no particular information that's provided to the banks. We use public information about the company. So they relied on, at the time, the full year results 2014. No additional information is provided.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Verder geen vragen, dan gaan we naar de...
Well, thank you very much. If there are no further questions, let's look at our next agenda item, which is the trial of the new voting device. I'd like to apologize for my voice. I have a cold. I hope you can all understand me, and I would like to guide you through this procedure. Let me ask you first to use the voting card with the gold dot pointing towards you and to insert that into the voting device. If everything works well, you'll see your name in the display. I hope it works well for all of you. If you need assistance, please raise your hand. I cannot see any raised hands. So that's great. I'd like to ask the voting operator to turn on the system. Okay? Now you will see in the display of your voting device and here on the screen the various voting possibilities. If you have a vote in favor, you will press 1. If you vote against, you can press 2. And if you want to abstain, please press 3. Now, let's try this out. Now, the fictitious question is, or statement is, you can make white wine out of blue grapes. Would you please vote now if you are in favor of this statement? 1, against 2, and abstention 3. You'll see on your display what your choice was. You can change your vote as long as the voting hasn't been closed. I see that everyone is voting. You have a couple of seconds left. Please make your choice with respect to this statement. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm now going to close this tryout. have a look at our civil notary, who is supervising this first round of voting. I see that the result is going to come up on the screen, and I'm very happy to see that everyone knows, or practically everyone knows, that it is possible to make white wine out of blue grapes. In conclusion, I'd like to say that you can leave your voting card in your voting device throughout the meeting. Chair, I hand back the floor. Well, ladies and gentlemen, then we'll do a serious round of voting now. I would like to inform the meeting that each and every share offers you the right to cast one vote. You will see in the results the votes in favor of, the votes against, and the abstentions. Abstentions, according to our Articles of Associations, are non-cast votes. That is why you will only see percentages for votes in favor and against. Let me proceed to the vote on agenda item 4, adoption of the financial statements. The Secretary. Thank you very much. I'd like to ask the operator to turn on the system. Let me wait until that has happened. The vote is now open on agenda item 4, adoption of the financial accounts. Please vote. 1 in favor of, 2 against, 3 abstentions.
U heeft nog even om uw stem uit te brengen.
You have a few seconds more to cast your vote.
Ja, ik sluit de stemming.
I now close the vote. Look at the civil notary. And now we will see the results. I am confused because the bar on the screen is red, but we have a carried proposal here. Thank you very much. Let's have a look at reserve and dividend policy. These are 2 points under agenda item 5. We are looking at reserve policy and determining the dividend for 2014. First, 5A, reserve policy, which has been unchanged compared to last year. This reserve policy is closely linked to the dividend policy. The dividend that DSM pays to its shareholders depends on the circumstances of the company, the financial results, other companies, and other relevant factors. DSM aims to provide a stable and preferably rising dividend. The Management Board, with the approval of the Supervisory Board, may propose that the dividend will, up to the choice of a shareholder, be distributed in cash or in ordinary shares of DSM. Are there questions about this? Who would like to have the floor? Mr. Stevens. Thank you, Chair. Stevens, SRB. I would like to discuss the amount of the dividend. There are years in which the dividend increases only 5 cents. There are some investment companies that look at a stable dividend flow or look at increase year on year. This line of increased dividend is being broken. I was wondering why you did not increase the dividend amount. As the chair said, we have, or pointed out, we have a dividend policy that aims at a stable and preferably rising policy. This is a different one from the dividend we had in the past, where it was a percentage of the cash flow, because we restructured our portfolio. In the past years, we were able to increase our dividend step by step. The results development in this year meant that because the results weren't higher, we also believed it wasn't a responsible measure to increase the dividend. That is why, if you also look at other investment companies or funds, that they look at your return above 3%. We have that at this point in time, and that is why this dividend is above the 3%. And we notice with a lot of investors who look at dividend return that our return fits within their targets. Of course, everyone wishes to receive more, but it was within their defined targets. My name is Swinkels. I'd like to go back to what I talked about last year and what is in the minutes as well. And that refers to the loyalty dividend. Now my question is to Mr. Siebesma. Has something changed there? Is there informal or formal consultation within the corporate arena in the Netherlands about this loyalty dividend? Shouldn't we succeed in bringing this about sometime, somewhere? What can I say more than what I've said in the past 8 years? It was a great plan, and it came from DSM, by the way. I still think that there's a rationale that makes very clear that if you want to stay with a company for the long term, that you then should be awarded a slightly higher dividend than other shareholders that only stick in for a short while. We remember how it was presented. There was a lot to do about it. The shareholders weren't all in support of it, and they even started proceedings. We enjoy standing with our shareholders, but not in front of a judge, rather in front of a bar holding a beer. Now, we've said we'll forget about it right now. It doesn't mean that we've done away with it altogether, but there's no initiative to resuscitate the plan. Comment off mic. My neighbor is reacting to this answer you gave. That is true. France is a different country, and the concerns expressed there also by international shareholders about the absurdity, etc. You can differentiate there because in France it is a very common practice. A lot of companies have such a loyalty dividend, but internationally France is seen as an exception. But in France, this is quite common. There are several companies. GDF Suez is one of them. But I assume, Chair, that you talked to your shareholders about this because that was your starting point in those days where you were looking at the possibility to actually get to know your shareholders through registrations. And I think that your dream shareholder, like myself, I'm one of them, but we know you, Mr. Swinkels, we already know you. Yes, but also other parties sitting next to me or behind me. And from them, you don't get any signal whatsoever. And from the pension funds, etc., don't they go in and out? No, what we regularly do is we do a shareholders identification process. So we know quite a lot about our shareholders. It is true if you had a registration obligation, which is logical with such a loyalty dividend, because otherwise you don't know who to pay out to, then you automatically register all your shareholders worldwide. And that would make an identification process a bit easier. But it's not true that we don't know who our shareholders are at this point in time. We know reasonably well, but never 100%. And that was one of the advantages, actually a minor advantage within the loyalty dividend idea. We do see that most of the shareholders who invested in DSM do that for the long term. That is something that we wanted to reward. Possibly it'll come up again, but right now, no. I am sure that you'll remind us each and every year. If there are no further questions to agenda item 5A, we'll continue with B, adoption of the dividend for 2014. In the financial accounts, we see a net profit of 145 million. On the basis of this, the managing board, with the approval of the supervisory board, would like to reserve part of that profit, but for 2014, we're not going to reserve any of it. We're going to pay out for Comprev shares A, 10 million, and we have the rest of the amount at the disposal of the shareholders meeting. We would like to say that we pay 151 million to the reserves so that we have the rest, 280 million, at the disposal of the shareholders meeting. With the approval of the supervisory board, the managing board would like to suggest to pay out €1.65 per ordinary share as dividend, taking into account that there has been an interim dividend of 50 cents per ordinary share. The final dividend amounts to €1.15 per ordinary share. At the option of the shareholder, the final dividend will be made available in cash or in ordinary shares. The period in which this choice can be made is from 7 to 20 May of this year. All information in this respect it will be given here. As of the 26th of May, we are going to make the dividend payable. Are there any questions? I see no one who wishes to ask a question, so I would like to proceed to the vote immediately. I would like to ask the operator to turn on the system again. I'd like to open the vote with respect to the adoption of the dividend. 1 in favor of, 2 against, 3 abstention. You have a couple of seconds left. I would like to close. Look at the civil notary for the results. I see that the results are known and they will be presented on the screen. 98.84% are in favor of, 1.16 against, and I see 1 abstention. Chair, we can continue.
Can we just interrupt the vote because it's just a procedural issue? Bit of a nuisance. I'm just checking the first row here. The interim dividend wasn't 50 cents but 55 cents, and the final dividend was not 1.15 but 1.10. It's only 5 cents different, but it is important nonetheless. Let me just. Am I correct? Because here in the chairman's guidelines, the numbers are different from what I just said. So the interim dividend was 55 cents, and the final dividend is €1.10. That's what we're talking about here. Okay, so that is what we are voting on. So, okay, we'll repeat the vote. Operator, could you perhaps open the system again? Activate the system for the vote on 5B, agenda item 5B, adoption of the dividend 2014. No, that's correct. I'll tell you when the system is activated. It's activated. So I'd request you once again to cast your vote, and the correction is that we're talking about a final dividend of €1.10. Let's see whether the results show the same percentages. You have a couple of seconds. Vote is closed once again. Looking at the civil law notary, see whether he has the results. He does. You'll see it on the screen. Fortunately, 98.84% in favor, 1.16 against, and once again 1 abstention. Thank you very much. My reputation has just been saved. Thank you very much, Feike. You're very perceptive. Thank you. I can now confirm that dividend 2014 for ordinary shares has been adopted in accordance with the proposal. Now we're proceeding to release from liability the members of the Managing Board. You can vote on the release of liability of members of the Managing Board and then the Supervisory Board, two separate items. First of all, members of the Managing Board. This concerns a release of liability in respect of the managerial activities shown in the annual report or otherwise disclosed to the general meeting of shareholders prior to the adoption of the financial statement. I assume there are no further questions. No? Okay, so we can put this to the vote. Thank you, Chairman. I would request the operator to activate the system. The vote is open on item 6A. I'm sure you're familiar with the procedure by now. Let's see whether there's anyone that still needs to cast their vote. The vote is closed. Let's just wait for the notary to give us the results. Yes, I see that the results appearing on the screen. 99.51% in favor, 0.49% against, no abstentions. Chairman, I confirm that the members of the Managing Board have been released from liability for their policy. And now we proceed to item 6B, release from liability of members of the Supervisory Board. Once again, I assume that there are no questions. And with that, we can proceed to the vote. I would once again request the operator to activate the system. Just wait till it appears on the screen. I would request you to cast your vote on 6B, release from liability of the members of the Supervisory Board. I'll close the vote. I'm just waiting for the notary public to give me a sign. We have the results, and that 99.51% have voted in favor and 0.49% against and 1 abstention. So the Supervisory Board has been released from liability for its supervision. Item 7, reappointment of Mr. Stefan B. Tander as member of the Managing Board. Supervisory Board proposes that Mr. Tander be reappointed as a member of the Managing Board. Supervisory Board is nominating Mr. Tander in view of his international experience, his managerial qualities, and his knowledge of the sectors in which DSM operates. And the reappointment will be for a period of 4 years, ending on the closure of the AGM to be held in 2019. Are there any questions? If not, we can proceed to the vote. Thank you. Operator, can you activate the system? I would request you to cast a vote on item 7, the reappointment of Mr. Tander. I'll give you a couple of seconds more. Closing the vote. Yes. 99.92% has voted in favor, 0.08% against. Mr. Tander, therefore, has been reappointed as member of the Managing Board. Congratulations, Stefan. Now, the reappointment of Ms. Pauline F.M. van der Meermoor as member of the Supervisory Board. According to the rotation schedule, Ms. van der Meermoor is 4-year term expires in 2015, and she's available for reappointment, which is why the Supervisory Board is nominating Ms. van der Meermoor in view of her extensive experience in terms of human resource management and international experience. Ms. van der Meermoor is an independent supervisory director in accordance with the Dutch Corporate Governance Code and the rules of the Supervisory Board. The reappointment would be for a period of 4 years, ending at the closure of the AGM to be held in 2019. Are there any questions? Mr. Stevens. Stevens, SRB. We don't have a problem with Ms. Moore. We have a problem with the schedule of retirement. Next year, 3 out of the 7 directors will be stepping down, which is 42%. We would want you to make sure that next year, possibly 1 supervisory director stay on for 1 more year for everything to run smoothly. Excellent observation, and it does have our attention. No further questions? Then we can proceed to the vote. Thank you very much. Chairman, operator, could you please activate the system? You can cast your vote on item 8, the reappointment of Ms. van der Meermoor. 1 is in favor, 2 is against, 3 is abstention. Vote is closed. I'm looking at the notary. Yes, we do have the results. And you can see here that 98.99% is in favor and 0.01%, I should say, against and 2 abstentions. The AGM has reappointed Ms. van der Meermoor to the Supervisory Board. Pauline, congratulations. You can proceed to item 9 of the agenda, 9A, which is the extension of the authority of the Managing Board to issue ordinary shares. The General Meeting on 7th of May 2014 has extended the authorization to issue ordinary shares or to restrict or exclude preemptive shares for a period of 18 months. And this authorization will end on November 7, 2015. And it is proposed to extend the powers of the authorization of the Managing Board to a time in 18 months' time, so until October 30, 2016. Should the Managing Board decide to issue shares, such a decision would be subject to the approval of the Supervisory Board. In item A of this item on the agenda, it concerns the issuance of ordinary shares, including granting rights to purchase such shares. It is proposed to restrict this authorization of the Managing Board to a nominal amount of shares equaling 10% of issued share capital at the moment of issuance and an additional 10% of subscribed capital at the moment at which the issuance takes place, if the issuance takes place in the context of a merger or acquisition fitting with the strategy of DSM as disclosed on DSM's website. Are there any questions? No, so we can proceed to the vote. Operator, could you please activate the system? And now you can cast your vote on 9A, extension of the authorization of the Managing Board to issue ordinary shares. I'll give you a couple of seconds to cast your vote. The vote is closed. I'm just waiting for a signal from the notary. You can see that 94.21% has voted in favor, 5.79% against, and 3 abstentions. So the AGM has extended the authorization for the Managing Board to issue shares. 9B, extension of the authorization of the Managing Board to limit or exclude the preferential rights when issuing ordinary shares. This concerns the authorization to restrict or exclude preemptive rights when issuing ordinary shares, including the granting of rights to take up ordinary shares. And the authorization of last year will end on the 7th of November, barring extension. Just as in the previous item, the proposal is to extend the authorization of the Managing Board to a time 18 months after today, i.e. October 30, 2016. And once again, such a decision of the Managing Board would be subject to the approval of the Supervisory Board. Just as with the issuance of shares, the proposal is to restrict this authorization to an amount of ordinary shares that is equal to 10% of issued capital at the moment of issuance of the shares, and an additional 10% at the moment of issuance if the issuance occurs within the context of a merger or acquisition fitting DSM's strategy as disclosed on DSM's website. Are there any questions? If there are no questions, we can proceed to the vote. Thank you very much. I would request the operator to activate the system. I would request you to issue your vote on 9B. I'll give you a couple of more seconds. Vote is closed. Yes, we have the results. 83.4% has voted in favor, 16.6 against, and there have been 4 abstentions. So the AGM has extended the authorization of the Managing Board to limit or exclude the preferential right in accordance with the proposal. Now we can proceed to item 10, which is authorization of the Managing Board to have the company repurchase shares or purchase its own shares. The company can acquire its own shares pursuant to a decision of the Managing Board, subject to the approval of the Supervisory Board, and this requires an authorization of the AGM. Such a authorization can only be given for a maximum of 18 months. The AGM is proposed to grant the authorization to the Managing Board to repurchase own shares as referred to in Article 13 of the Articles of Association by means of purchase at the stock exchange or otherwise for a period of 18 months from the date of this AGM, i.e. up to 30th October 2016, up to a maximum of 10% of issued capital, provided that the company will hold no more shares in stock than a maximum of 10% of issued capital. Furthermore, the authorization regarding the purchase of ordinary shares will be for a price between the nominal value and the opening price of the Euronext Amsterdam Exchange on the day of purchase plus 10%. And as far as the purchase of cumulative preference shares A for a price between the par value and the computation base referred to in Article 32, Section 3 of the Articles of Association, plus another 10%. The price range enables the company to adequately repurchase its own shares, also in volatile market conditions. The authorization of the Managing Board to repurchase its own shares may be withdrawn by the General Meeting of Shareholders, and the proposed authorization will replace the authorization granted to the Managing Board last year. No questions? Yes, one. Chairman, how many shares have been repurchased? Do we have an answer to this question?
Want some help here? I believe the table is in the notes to the annual statement as to the repurchase of treasury shares last year.
Daar is de hulp uit de zaal.
Thank you very much. And the number of shares repurchased during the year 2014 is indeed disclosed on page 165 of the annual report, which is 8.888.185.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, dan stemming over agenda punt 10.
Okay, so we can proceed to the vote on agenda item 10. Operator, can you activate the system? I would now request you to cast your vote on item 10, which is authorization of the Managing Board to purchase its own shares, repurchase shares in the company. Just a couple of seconds. The vote is closed. I'm just waiting for the notary public to give me the signal. We have the results. As you can see, that 99.47% has voted in favor, 53% against, and 3 abstentions. And that means that the authorization has been granted in accordance with the proposal. Item 11, reduction of issued capital by cancelling shares. Issue of shares, for instance, in connection with the exercise of the option rights annually granted to DSM's management and personnel, may lead to a dilution of share capital. To the extent that DSM's financial position should allow this, and the possibilities therefore exist in the share market, this disadvantage for holders of ordinary shares shall be offset as much as possible by purchasing and possible cancellation of shares in DSM's own capital. Authorization to repurchase own shares was dealt with under item 10 of the agenda, and this concerns the capital reduction following. On to that, the Managing Board proposes that the AGM should decide to reduce the issued capital and withdrawing the capital to a maximum number. And the company therefore will be able to optimize its capital structure, its equity structure. The capital reduction number will be determined by a managing board and is limited to a maximum of 10% of issued capital as appearing from the financial statements 2014. The amount of the capital reduction shall always appear from a resolution adopted to this end by the managing board, which will be filed at the trade register. No questions? We can proceed to the vote. Operator, can you activate the system? So now you can cast your vote on item 11 on the agenda. Vote is closed. I'm just waiting for a signal from the civil law notary. There we go. 99.89% in favor, 0.11% against. So the AGM has decided to a reduction of issued capital in accordance with the proposal of the managing board. Any other business? I would like to give you the opportunity to raise questions on subjects that have not been addressed under the different agenda items. Are there any questions left? Mr. Stevens has many questions for us today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Stevens, SRB. Yes, I ask this question every year. This has got to do with the financial calendar, planning of meetings. And we believe this calendar is much too short. It should be extended. On the website, we have a calendar until 4 November 2015, and the annual report, February 17. Now, we would like to see a calendar that extends up to the AGM following this AGM, or preferably, in this case, the planning for 2016. You are an important company. If you look at what BMW does, or Vopak, they also have an extended financial calendar. So what are your reasons for not doing this? Mr. Siebersman. We shall try to do so because the date in which we disclose the annual figures 2015, we do have them in our calendar. So we do have that for 2016, so I think we can do that. And we can also publish the date of the AGM. We don't want our AGM to be on the same date as an AGM of another company of which one of our supervisory directors are involved. So let's see whether we can be a bit more forward-looking in our financial planning. Well, usually all the dates have been set for next year by now. Yes, but we're also very good at forward planning, so we're going to take a look at this, and I'm quite sure that we'll be able to comply with your wishes. Thank you. Yes. Chairman, my name is Swinkels. Actually, I have a question about the notice of this meeting. And actually, I wanted to ask you about the intermediaries. One is obligated, when one registers for this meeting, that the banks, the individual, the address, and domicile be stated. Now, my problem is that I'm in your shareholders register, so I'm sure you have my personal details, but the statement that I was sent by ABN AMRO doesn't state my address. So when I read your notice for the meeting, that doesn't tally with what we get in our entrance ticket. It says that intermediaries are obligated to state the address on the entrance ticket for the AGM. That is one thing. On page 7, I have read that you have opened a new R&D center in the Netherlands. And Mr. Fraser this afternoon explained how innovative you are with waste and plastic and so on. So my request would be, wouldn't it be possible for us to be invited in this year to visit this R&D center? That's my request to you. The addresses and the banks. Yes. Well, Well, quite something. Well, there is a difference. So I don't know exactly what the situation is, but there is a difference between registered shares and bearer shares. I don't know exactly what the situation is. I don't think we should discuss this here publicly, what your personal situation is. So that would lead to an address filled in or not filled in on the ticket. But we can make sure that Louise takes this on board and discusses this, not with all banks, but perhaps she can check how we've arranged this with the bank. The other question is a visit and whether it's going to be specifically this research unit. I would like to ask Mark Silverstone. I think he's in the back of the room, and he's going to stand. Yes, I'm sure you're familiar with him. So perhaps you can use a microphone. No, not necessary, not necessary. No, all you need to do is see him. So the question is whether you can arrange for something, some sort of visit. We've done it before, and Mr. Swinkels has reported that he would like to attend it, and then you can arrange things. Thank you. I'll be happy to do that. Last time he even helped us out, 3 years ago. Oh, that's outsourcing, even better. Great. Well, thank you for helping. Thank you. And thank you for your interest. That's great. Are there any other questions? Yes, Chairman, my name is Spanier for the record. First of all, I think you deserve a compliment that the managing board has decided not to have a salary increase for this period. And my second question is about Iran. It's about 2015, so I couldn't raise it earlier. In July, you're going to open your operation there. You have all sorts of health products and nutrition and stuff. And Iran, with a population of 120 million, how do you think you will be serving that population? Do you already have planning and guidelines for that? I hope so. Well, this is a sensitive, or always has been a sensitive subject, and I think that we should deal with this subject very, very carefully. For years, also the Netherlands, and our company is part of that, and Dutch legislation, American legislation, and our company is dealing with that. There's been a boycott, not for all products, but for many products. So there's always been an exception with the UN products that have something to do with nutrition or medication or whatsoever. Nonetheless, this has led to the fact that it's always been very tough to do business with Iran. And over the past few years, years being many years, now it seems that it's going to open up this summer. We'll have to wait and see. It has to happen. It hasn't happened yet. And that way the market could open up a bit more for all sorts of products. We will take a closer look at that. But how should I say this? Of course, we will look at this with business sense, of course, from a business perspective, but with a certain degree of caution, because we do realize that we're coming from a very sensitive history, and we won't let business opportunities pass by, but we'll be very cautious. Anybody else? Mr. Chairman, my name is van der Linde. In the past, DSM issued a calendar every year in which professors, experts provided an extensive description of life in Limburg. And I'm a collector, a collector of these calendars, and I have a couple of double copies. And should there be shareholders interested in becoming acquainted with these calendars, they can report to me. And perhaps in the future you might be taking the initiative to continue on this path, issuing perhaps somewhat updated version of these calendars. Well, talking about sensitive subjects, seriously, the DSM calendar for years and years has been a very important collector's item for many, many people. We stopped doing this about 6 years ago, 2000. Oh, well, even before that then. And the 6 years after that, we discussed why we stopped that. Anyway, so I very much appreciate the fact that you would emphasize the importance of the calendar. Now, if you want to find someone who would be interested in your calendars, Mark Silvertand is at the back of the room. It is a collector's item, and we're going to see whether we can do something for you in the future. Thank you. Do you have a question? Van der Belt is my name. My question is, would it be possible to have a bit more Dutch text on your website and not everything in English? We have 2 websites, and it may be a matter of looking around a bit. We do have a DSM Netherlands website, which is exclusively in the Dutch language, and then we have the DSM corporate website, which is in the English language. And yes, what we have been doing over the past few years is transitioning over to English as a corporate language. All the press releases are issued only in the English language nowadays, and this has got to do with, just look at the composition, supervisory board and also managing board and top executives. We have switched over to English because a major part of the company simply does not speak Dutch. Just look at the people here at the table, which means that all the communication is in English. Corporate website will remain in English, but you can visit the DSM Netherlands website, and I don't know exactly what the address is, www.dsm.nl, and you'll find everything in the Dutch language. Thank you. I see no further hands, no questions. We've reached the end of this meeting. Nonetheless, I would like to take the opportunity to thank Mr. Stefan de Botsky at the end of the table for his dedication to DSM. He's going elsewhere, better place, and next year, I don't think there's a better place than DSM, but anyway, he won't be here next year. Anyway, I'm sure, well, he won't be here at the table next year. Thank you very much for your dedication, everything you've done for the company. I would also take a moment to refer to the fact that this is the last AGM under the auspices of our civil law notary, Mr. Visser. I would like to thank him for more than 20 years that he supervised our votes at the AGMs and wish him all the best in his new career after being a civil law notary for so many years. Now, the following announcements. The minutes of this meeting will be available on the website at most 3 months after today's AGM. I would request you to return your voting card and handset. And as usual, we do have an opportunity to have a drink and a bite to eat. And I hope to see you while enjoying a drink. I'll see you next year at the AGM, which is planned to take place on April 29th, which is a Friday. I hope everybody can travel free of charge then. Thank you very much for coming, and the meeting is closed.